Lived 3,000-4,000 years ago, you would have not ever gone to the doctor if you didn't feel well. Whatever you got, however you felt, whatever was going on in your life, you would present yourself to the priest. And the priest would look it over and say, oh, you know, okay, and prescribe first he'd do a diagnosis, and then a prognosis, and then a prescription, and you would either get better or not. And so anyway, but when you came to the priest wouldn't say, how do you feel? The priest would say, oh, what did you do? Right? What have you done? Because the thinking was, you could not, no calamity could befall you, no disease could come on you, had you not sinned. So all events in human life were dictated by whether you had sinned or not, and anything that happened to you sort of depended on that. And so I'm wondering then today how we feel about that logic. Today, if something happens in your life or in the life of someone you love, I wonder what sort of causes you look for, and what sort of response you ask of God. In other words, if something happens to someone you love, is your first response, how can I help? Or is it, how'd you get in that place? What did you do to get there? I have some people in my life, right? People say that about me, I'm sure, right? What did you do to get there? Have you ever heard, oh, it must be God's will. If it happened to you, then it must be God's will, which is great as long as you're prospering. Right? But it sort of says something about God if you're not. What about there must be a reason? God never gives you any more than you can handle. That happened today. That's right in Corinthians. Basically, God never gives you any more than you can handle. Well, sometimes do you wish that God would trust you less? Yes. What are the vestiges of this theology that are with us today? I'm not saying that that we don't do or have behaviors that lead to bad consequences, of course. Right? You can do things, you can eat things, drink things, take things in, however, and it can cause a bad thing, right? You can cause disease. You can smoke too much, whatever. Of course. You can engage in risky behaviors. College students do this all the time, right? I'm not saying that there isn't a cause and effect that way. What I'm saying is you can't look at someone and judge from the way they are right now what they might have done in the past. You can't. You can't make those assumptions about them or about God. You certainly can't make that about the nature of their sinlessness or guilt. Okay. Now, Jesus, I think, addresses just this very thing in the gospel today. He does it two ways. He starts by telling them some history. There are two stories of history he tells them. He says, don't you guys remember? There wasn't long ago, he's telling these faithful people, he's saying it wasn't long ago that some Jewish Galileans came to make their sacrifice at the temple. And because Rome was angry, and because Pilate worked for Rome, he killed them. He killed these faithful Jews on their way to make the sacrifice in the temple. So the animal that they had brought to shed the blood that was part of the sacrifice was spilled, and their own blood was spilled. And those bloods were mixed, right? In this awful, horrific, gruesome scene. And he's saying, what did they do? They were on their way to make they maybe had just made the sacrifice. They couldn't be any less sinful. Why are you any different? Why did that happen to them, if there's this cause and effect? And then he tells them the story, the second story about the Tower of Siloam, which is a tower like on a big wall. They'll have towers every so often, right? So there's this tower around Jerusalem, and that tower, the wall around Jerusalem, the tower falls, and it kills 18 people, innocent people. And he's saying, what makes them any different than you? Right? If you think you're enjoying prosperity and God's good graces, are you any sinless than those people who were killed? And I wonder, do we ever think about those things? I think about some remarks that were made by Pat Robertson, the tsunami not long ago. I think about how we reacted to the AIDS epidemic in the 90s. Right? I think about how do we place guilt on people? The first point I want to make that I think Jesus makes is you can't work back. You can't say, this is the way it is, and now I can look back and say, that's what you did. Okay? Then he tells them a parable. Now, parables are stories, and we're supposed to sort of see where we're at in the story. So the parable is about a fig tree that is not bearing fruit. And there's the person who owns the fig tree comes and says, that fig tree's not making any fruit, cut it down. And the gardener says what? Nope, not yet. Gardener says, give me one more chance. Give me one more growing season. I'm going to put some manure there, I'll keep working around, and if it's not bearing fruit in one more season, then you can chop it down. Now, who's who in this story? Jesus is telling the story. Who's who? Who's the owner? Huh? We're the owner? What's the fig tree? Who's the fig tree? We're the tree. So we're the owner and the tree? Are we the gardener? Who's the gardener? Who's the manure? No. No. So a lot of times people will say, well, that was Judaism, and when the Christians came, they cut down Judaism and put in Christian, so yay us, we're the best tree. It's not like that. What I'm asking you to think about is, what if that tree is your faith? Your faith is the fig tree. Okay? And Jesus comes and says, give me one more season. Give me one more shot at this. I'm asking you, why do you come to church at all? What is it that you're missing in your life that you think this fills some kind of hole for you? What are you expecting church to do? What are you expecting your faith to do for you? Joy? Grow? I want to grow from something to something else?
Comfort.
I want comfort. I want peace. Did you, what?
Strength.
I want strength. Yeah. Is your faith providing the fruit in your life that you're looking for? Is the question. Some of us will say, yeah, it's doing what I kind of expect to do. Others of us might be like, I don't even know why I come to church, right? I'm not getting anything out of it, to be honest with you, right? What fruit is your faith producing? And is it producing the fruit that you want, right? Now, here's what I want to tell you. I'm going to invite you today to invest in God one more season. I'm going to invite you to do everything, to go all in with God. One time, for a season. And at the end of that season, see what has happened to your life and to your faith. And I'm going to give you permission right now, if at the end of the season, you don't feel like this faith is producing the fruit that you want, don't come back. Okay? Now, that may not seem like a very smart thing for me to say, because frankly, some of you might not come back. Right? Wouldn't it be awful if a year from now the church was empty? I'm here all by myself. Wait, I didn't mean it. Come back. I was kidding. But I got to tell you, I trust God. I completely, 1,000% trust God. And I'm saying, if you will give God one season and go all in with God, do what God is asking you to do with your faith, to spread it around and open it up and really live into it, that something will happen in your life. And that something will be what you're looking for. I'm saying, I trust God to bring that fruit in a year. And that's why I make that challenge, right? Okay? So I trust that something will happen. Have you ever gone all in with God? I have. I used to sit in the pews, and I'd go pretty regularly, really. But I'm going to tell you, I didn't feel like my faith was producing the kind of fruit in my life that I thought it should. And so I went on a 10-week course. They call it the Alpha Course. There are others. This just happened to be one. It doesn't have to be this one. And about the third night, I'm watching this video series with a bunch of people, and the guy who's on the tape is a really charismatic Anglican from London, and he's talking about Bible and all, and I'm like, I am just not buying what he's selling. I'm there 3 weeks, and the third week I'm like, you know what, I just don't believe, I can't believe exactly what he's saying, and I can't make the connections exactly the way he's saying. And I went home, and I thought about it, and I prayed about it a little bit, and I said to myself, okay, I said to God, I'm going to go all in. Right? I said basically the prayer from Mark, where the guy says, Lord, I believe, help my unbelief. Remember that? Lord, I believe, help my unbelief. And what I did, I honestly had to do this. I had to set aside what I was so struggling with, the idea that Jonah really couldn't live in a whale for 3 days. Right? That was my big deal. If it all has to be true, then I just can't go there. And so anyway, I was like, okay, I'm going to set that aside. I'm going all in. I'm in for the whole thing. And a year later, my life was dramatically different. My faith was producing the joy and the peace and the happiness that I was looking forward to produce. So I think the second lesson, Right? The first lesson is you can't look at someone's position, situation, and make assumptions about what they did. Neither can you look at someone's position in life and make assumptions about what they're going to do. Right? You couldn't have predicted that night that I would do what I do, right? I'm saying you can't go either way because both things are so dependent on the choices that we make. Everything we do is dependent on the choices we make right now. And I'm saying to you, would you be willing to make a different choice? Would you be willing to go all in with God for a season? Make that choice today. You know, commit yourself to worship regularly. Commit yourself to praying every day. Commit yourself to serving others in the world. Commit yourself to reading scriptures. Commit yourself to God. Go all in. I would be very interested in a year from now what fruit that might have borne in your